Stoughton Audio presents.
Ooh, the books just went everywhere. These were the books I was supposed to read for July and August, and I thought if I set myself a 6-week TBR, because I was a little behind in July, I thought that would help me kind of get through a larger pile of books, and I thought that would take a little bit of pressure off and not make me feel like I had to read anything. And I thought then I could pick a bunch of different books from a bunch of different genres, and that would kind of allow me to manage a TBR and being a mood reader at the same time. It was only 2 days into August when I nearly shifted my focus to the bright shiny new books that I had just ordered. To the point where I'm going to have to do a book haul because every book in the world seemed more appealing than the books on my TBR. So I don't think I'm going to keep doing TBRs. I think I'm just going to read whatever I feel like reading, and my whole bookshelf is a TBR. It doesn't help that I have received a ton of recommendations for particular YA books lately, and I've been feeling like reading YA. So there wasn't really much in the way of YA on my TBR. The first book on the list was finishing Friedrich Bachmann's A Man Called Uwe, which I'm listening to on audiobook, or was listening to. I finished that and I did enjoy it. I thought it was beautifully written and a beautiful, beautiful character study, but it was a little bit like reading a book about my dad. There are an insane number of similarities between Uwe and my dad, like to an almost creepy point. So it was a weird read. It was a weird read, but I'm going to do a review about Uwe and not my dad on this channel at some point soon. Full disclosure, I haven't actually done that much reading. I got into this really intense pattern of procrastination and watching Olympics, cleaning the house, mass cooking, anything to put off doing what I needed to do. I've been super tired. I've still been having really messed up dreams about Mali. I was looking at going back to work, and then COVID screwed that up, and my book came back from the editor, and I'm just kind of like mulling over ideas and how I'm going to fix that problem and how I'm going to like fill in the gaps that he identified. And so I feel like I've been doing a lot of kind of just moving through life slowly while my brain is elsewhere. And I mean, if you're a writer, you would kind of understand that sometimes, you know, you're vacuuming and you're actually thinking about ideas for the writing. So there's been a lot of that kind of thing going on, and I've also just been super tired to the point where like I emailed my endocrinologist and said, hey, were my last blood tests a bit funky? And apparently not, but I'm finally starting to feel a little bit more awake. So I'm hoping to get back to these, but Carty-Williams' Queenie was a victim of that. So I started reading this book, I was about 3 chapters in, and then this wave of fatigue hit me, and I haven't actually picked it back up again since, but I really want to. Murakami's Norwegian Wood was on my list because I've been stuck in the 100-page chapter 6 for 100 years. I'm pretty sure I've been dabbling with this book now for 10 months, and I needed to decide this month whether I was going to walk away or finish it, and I haven't actually gotten any closer to a decision. What I want to try and do is pick it up again and get going again from where I was up to in chapter 6, and if I can't finish that chapter, then walk away. If you watch the videos on this channel, you will know that I loved Sally Rooney's Normal People. It is the first book in a long time I've had positive feelings for the entire way through. I have had a mad reading slump lately and DNF'd or failed to finish a ton of books and have felt really kind of like lukewarm about a lot of books. Not the case with this one, and I'm also reading one at the moment that is rocking my world. So we'll get to that later. Growing Up Queer in Australia is a book that is basically a compilation of essays written by people of the LGBTQ plus community about their experience growing up in Australia and what it was like in their particular family situation or their cultural situation or in their community in general, about what it was like growing up and sometimes realizing they were queer or their first queer experience, or it's basically just a lot of really interesting essays where people are shedding light on their experience. And I've been reading a couple of stories every couple of days. It's not the sort of book that for me I would be able to sit down and just read cover to cover. There were quite a few stories in here that I felt quite emotional about, and which is a good thing. And they're beautifully written, and it's lovely that people are willing to let you into their life experience. But it's a lot to read, and I feel like to take it in and to do the stories justice, I just need to do it bit by bit. So I probably won't finish this by the end of the month, but I'm going to continue working on it. The last essay in this book is actually written by the son of the bookstore owner where I bought this book. So that was kind of cool. So that's a local community member represented in this book, which is lovely. But yeah, so making my way through this one. And then I also have Growing Up Aboriginal in Australia on my shelves, which I think is going to be, given the book that I am reading at the moment that is like rocking my world, I think Growing Up Aboriginal in Australia is probably going to be my next move. Or I might finish Stan Grant's Australia Day, because fascinating insight into so much. The Living Sea of Waking Dreams. There was something about this cover that I loved, and the description on the back of the book kind of sounded interesting, and I know a number of people who've read this book and they all raved about it, said it was unusual, but raved about it. I am no further in this book than when I last spoke about it. I was reading this when I was traveling around southern New South Wales and I was in snowy mountains, and it is weird as fuck. So, I mean, I'm probably going to finish it because it's kind of like, you bought the book, so just finish the book, because otherwise it was a waste of money. But I don't think this one is for me. But I'm still very confused about what's actually happening, so I can't really definitively say that. The other one I've made a fair bit of progress on is Black Sabbath's Symptom of a Universe by Mick Wall. This, I'm about halfway through this one. I haven't picked it up in about a week, but I don't really know a lot about Black Sabbath's music. Obviously Ozzy Osbourne kind of made his way into pop culture with one of the first reality shows, The Osbournes, which I used to love. But what I'm pleasantly finding is that you don't have to be super familiar with their music to enjoy this book. And one of the things I hate in biographies is when they spend so long analyzing the childhood and telling you tiny random events from the childhood that don't really seem to have any like purpose to the story. This just skips straight into, this is how the band kind of came together, this was their background history with music, and this is kind of their personality, and this is how it mushed together and was a beautiful disaster. And it's really interesting because the members of this band are interesting, and I was hoping that this book would certainly be an insight into the madness, because you do hear stories like Ozzy biting the head off a bat, which now in Corona time seems like a bad move, but I was hoping to kind of get a little glimpse behind into the madness, and so far so good. The book that wasn't on my TBR but that has been calling to me from my iPod, and I actually have been mostly listening to this as an audiobook as I'm moving around the house and gardening, is this one. And I am not going to try and say the name of the book because I will butcher it. And the beautiful thing about listening to this as an audiobook is that you get to listen to a beautiful weaving of the Aboriginal language into the story. And the language is so beautiful, and I am terrified that I am going to butcher it. But this is one of the best books that I have ever read, and I'm only halfway through it. The author is actually also the author of Growing Up Aboriginal in Australia, which I found out the other day. I actually picked this book up yesterday. I've had a feeling for about a week that New South Wales was not going to be able to avoid a total statewide lockdown. And so I've been going to the shops and getting little bits and pieces of what I'm going to need going forward for a potential lockdown, and trying to do it at times where there are less people at shops. And I was at the shops yesterday when they announced lockdown, and I grabbed the last copy of this and ran out the door, and I was very excited to get the last copy of this. The translation for the title of this book is River of Dreams. So this is set in 1838 Gundagai, which is in rural New South Wales. There is a character in it who is kind of, I'm guessing, kind of the equivalent of someone who says, I don't see colour. And without sort of being preachy, you kind of understand why that is really dismissive of a person of colour's experience, because this woman is sort of raving on about how she wants equality for the Indigenous community, and she's trying to find a way to force that upon them, and it's her version of equality, and what she's actually doing is making them miserable and forcing them into slavery and taking them away from their families. And it's just, you know, and she's theoretically a more palatable character because she, I guess, is at least considering their perspective a little bit, even if she's not really taking anything on board. And I mean, even then, calling her a more palatable character is pretty horrific. But when the alternative is a lot of the other treatment that the Indigenous population suffered. But look, it's just, I don't want to talk about it too much now because I'm only halfway through it, but it is making me think, and it is brilliantly written, and it gives so much insight into the beautiful, rich culture of the Indigenous population, and a lot of insight into mistakes that have been made and are still being made by white people of privilege who think that they know better and know what's best for our Indigenous population. And yeah, it's a pretty eye-opening book without being preachy, which is like kind of amazing. And it's also like a really interesting story as well. Love it. So I guess this reading vlog basically is a lot of books that I haven't been able to really get into, and two great ones, one in particular that, yes. I forgot, there was one other book that I did read and listen to this month, and this was A Life on Our Planet, David Attenborough's witness statement. And holy shit, is it depressing. Like, we have fucked this place right up. But it's not all depressing. The second half is a lot less depressing. And he goes through a number of ways that we as individuals could make things better and do our bit. And he also talks about important projects that need to happen and need to happen immediately if we're to turn things around. And the thing that I found really interesting about this is that it's really like presented in a way that is not aggressive at all, that is not kind of like, what have you done? You've done terrible things and you're a bad person for eating meat. And it's just very matter of fact. It is really pretty confronting because you can't deny it anymore. It's like, you know, you hear a lot of people talking about how climate change isn't real and it's all a hoax, and it's really hard to read a book like this where they talk about, you know, this is the purpose of the ocean, and this is what this item does, and this is how fish breed, and this is what trees do, and then have like literal statistics about how much of our land we've sort of deforested and ripped down the trees, and how much percentage of actual natural wildlife there is, and then talk about biodiversity and its importance in keeping us alive, to be totally honest, and just how we've ignored that. And but it was just very fact-based, and I actually switched to audiobook for this because there's just something about David Attenborough's voice that when he talks, you're just sitting there going, yep, yep. And I just found that I took in a lot more of it with his beautiful, beautiful voice. And it's just pretty scary, like pretty scary to think what we've done. And, you know, like generally I like to eat vegetarian. Preferentially, I'd like to eat vegan, but the trouble is, because I'm gluten-free, I find some things taste poisonous or completely fall apart if you don't use eggs and butter to hold them together. So I tend to lean more towards vegetarian, but lately, because I've been so tired, I have been eating more meat products. And reading this book just kind of made me go, oh shit, I need to like tighten that back up and, you know, really refocus on trying to just eat a vegetarian lifestyle and just get a bit more variety in my diet, because you can make some really amazing foods that are vegetarian. And, you know, like just, I don't like fish. I've never eaten fish. It's not a thing for me. But just looking at fish farming and the way they breed fish, fascinating. And I feel like this should be required reading for everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this reading vlog. If you have, don't forget to like this video and to subscribe to my channel. You can check out my books, which are a YA fantasy series. The first 2 books of that series have already been released. The third one is not very far away. And those books are available in ebook and paperback format anywhere where books are sold. And their names are The Hunted and A Night Rises.